So it's all yours.
Thank you, Gary. Let me go ahead and share my screen quickly. And while that's loading for most of you, hopefully you can see it. But my name's Doug Krietemeyer. I'm the environmental planner for Arlington County Solid Waste Bureau. We fall under the county's Department of Environmental Services. And I have been with the county for just over 3 years now. As I was telling Carolyn and Gary earlier, this is a career change for me. Prior to this, I was both in the Army active duty and reserves as a military intelligence analyst, and then working in the defense contracting industry in DC prior to making my shift to the county. And this for me was a career change. I found out kind of later in life that I wanted more focus on environmental and sustainability issues. And so when I saw the opportunity come up with the county in this role, I decided to jump at it. And that's what has gotten me here today. And it's something I am very passionate about and excited to talk to you guys about. I do have a lot of information to share. So if you do have questions as I run through this, like Gary said, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll get to as many of them as possible. The Solid Waste Bureau oversees basically trash recycling and organics in the county. We have more input and hands-on with the curbside services offered to the single-family residential or townhouse community. And then we also do kind of monitor and regulate the commercial, multifamily, and industrial and institutional sectors through county code. So not as much hands-on with that. So a lot of what I'll be sharing today is going to be more geared towards the single family, the data points and things like that that I'll share will come from that because we do have a lot of hands-on in that area. But I will be sharing some of the different programs that we offer basically to all residents throughout the county. Let's see. Okay, so last year, the county board adopted the new solid waste management plan / zero waste plan. This is a 20-year planning document that basically governs how we will handle and manage waste that's generated within the county. And as part of that plan, the county board had set a goal of increasing waste diversion to at least 90% by 2038. And so our current recycling rate is just over 50%. So we have a long way to go and kind of a shorter period of time to get there. That's just 13 years away at this point. But a lot of it has to focus on the waste hierarchy, which is the inverted triangle that you see on your screen. So there's a lot of emphasis on source reduction, reuse, and recycling. And then when we get down into resource recovery, incineration, and landfilling, the top 3 levels of that pyramid are where we really want to focus our efforts. And that's where the reduction and diversion come in. And then, so that's where the bulk of the 90% of all the waste that we want to be diverted will go to. And then the remaining 10% would be within the resource recovery and incineration. Arlington co-owns the facility with Alexandria, the waste energy facilities. So all of the curbside trash that is collected goes to that facility in Alexandria. So I just wanted to give like a quick overview of kind of what the waste management system looks like and where our main focus is. So you kind of have two sides to this diagram. On the left-hand side is the source reduction. This is really focused on manufacturing, packaging, consumer behavior with purchases and their own habits and behaviors on how they handle and view waste. We have very little control over this. We can kind of influence how we would like it to go, but most of that is in the consumer's hands. Um, the main part that we focus on is the waste reduction piece, and really that is where does all the stuff go that we throw out or put into the blue recycling bins or into the composting bins. And this is where we really have a lot of control over how we set up that system and how we can help direct different materials to a uh, a better outcome or a better disposal option. So we always want to go for the higher and best use of a waste product. So something such as food scraps or yard waste, we always want people to try and compost that by using their green carts or some of the on-street bins that I'll talk about a little bit later. Recycling as much as possible, and things like that. So we always want to try and divert materials to where they will get that higher and best use rather than just sending them to the waste to energy facility to be burned, where they do create energy, but a lot of those materials, instead of just burning, can be put into other products. And so that's where we, really want to try and focus. Behavior change is getting people to do the right things with the things that they are wanting to get rid of. So this is every quarter, myself and a team of Solid Waste Bureau members conduct quarterly waste audits of the residential curbside service. This particular diagram is just of the trash cart, but we do sort all of the trash, recycling, and organics from those different carts into 43 different categories, essentially. And it gives us a really great picture of what the county's waste stream looks like. And with this data, we're able to see how we're performing in different areas, as well as how we might be able to change messaging or see how product packaging shifts over time. So if we see that there may be a need for a new program or something like that, it allows us to kind of push this out to the community and, educate and engage them on different areas. There's a lot of, I will say, for one, Arlington does a great job at recycling. You can see here that a very small portion of the circle is basically in the shades of blue, are the recyclable materials that end up in the trash cart, but there's always room for improvement. But particularly the one where we have a lot of focus on recently, especially since the zero waste plan was adopted last year, is food waste and compostable papers and organics. 25% of the waste stream in Arlington is food waste. And so that is an area where we really hope to be able to encourage people, but also get people to participate in the curbside organics program. So the green cart is not just for yard waste, but you can throw your clean food waste in there as well, to where it will all be composted. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the upcoming slides as well. But the right side of this circle is where our main focus is in trying to get as much of this material out of the trash cart and into those other two carts, the green cart and the blue cart, get as much of that material into those two carts as possible. And so this is just another kind of look at the materials that end up in the trash and recycling carts. This is focused on recycling materials, but we do look at like the different categories that you see here on the screen, and we can see and gauge how well we're doing in each of these categories. So one thing that Arlington residents are great at recycling is newspaper and cardboard. You can see that we average just about 90 or just over 90% of those materials actually get into the blue recycling cart. Whereas the other materials such as aluminum cans or plastics, mixed paper and juice or milk cartons, we have a little bit of room for improvement, but a lot of that comes down to just, what I'm doing here is helping to educate and engage the community on these things. And so it just gives us a picture where we can emphasize or reinforce what is and isn't recyclable. So this data, along with a lot of other data points, we launched, I believe it was just earlier this year or late last year, the Zero Waste Dashboard, which is a way of presenting this data to the community on an ongoing basis to help with transparency and see how the county is performing overall across all the different sectors. And you can find that and look around, but it does present a lot of different data points that you may find interesting. So if you have some time and want to check it out, I encourage you to do that. So when we talk about recycling, we always talk about focusing on really the basics. There are people that have a little bit more time or are more engaged in how they manage their waste. I will say that everyone's household is different. And so you alone, as you know, the person living in that house, you're the one that's best suited to gauge what you can and can't do. But we would always recommend that you focus on the basics, which are the materials that are kind of presented on the screen here. So it's your mixed paper, your plastic bottles and containers, cardboard, and then aluminum and steel cans. These are really the core of recycling. And the things that we see and find in the recycling cart as we do our audits, these are what we would call contaminants, and these are things that aren't suitable for the curbside recycling program. And that's going to be things like your plastic bags, chip bags, things like that, styrofoam, pots and pans, the plastic and padded shipping envelopes, as well as single-use plastics, and then glass. Glass shouldn't go in the curbside recycling cart. The county has special drop-off locations for glass. There's 5 of those, and I'll highlight those. I believe it's on the next slide where those are at. But if you don't want to take your glass to one of the drop-off locations, we recommend that you throw it into your black cart and dispose of it as trash. The one thing I do want to clarify, I think I've seen recently some confusion about what we consider single-use plastics. Those are going to be things like plastic straws, plastic utensils, plastic films or packaging of some sort that isn't really designed to be recycled. It could be a mix of materials or things like that, but those should all just go into the black trash cart. And the one thing I will say is if you have something in your hand that you're trying to debate whether or not it should go in your blue cart or not, is that if you have any doubt about it, just throw it in the trash. We would rather see a much cleaner recycling stream. Again, we want people to do the best that they can, and that's going to vary by degree and knowledge. But if you have any doubt, we just recommend throwing it in the trash. So quickly, I know people have a lot of questions about the type of plastics that can go in the curbside cart. Some people focus on numbers, some people focus on pictures, but really any plastic that if you can find the little triangle with the number inside of it, I will say 1 through 7, except for number 6, can go in your blue recycling cart. Now, I do know that even I'll say with even though I wear glasses and am a little bit, on the younger side, still have trouble finding where the recycling number is or that image on containers. The industry can make it very challenging to find that information and hide it in kind of an obscure place where you may not think to look at it. But if you do find it and it has a 1 through 7, with the exception of number 6, you are able to throw it in your curbside cart. With aluminum and steel cans, um, those, lids and all can go into the recycling cart. We also do ask and recommend that you throw your recyclings into the blue cart loose and not bagged in a plastic bag. If you do use a brown paper bag, we just ask that you don't like crimp it shut, but just set it in there loose. That way, if you were to grab the bottom of it and tip it upside down, everything would fall out of it. And the reason for that is typically when things arrive at the recycling facility bagged, they get pulled out as contamination, even if everything in it is recyclable material that fall into these categories. Plastic bags can cause issues with the sorting machinery. It also can possibly create safety issues for workers, because there are people that do handle bags and on the conveyor belts, and if they don't know what's in the bag, there's a possibility of getting cut, stabbed by a needle, or just some other type of negative safety concern. And so they will just pull those and throw those out as contamination a lot of times. So please don't bag your recyclables, just dump them into the blue cart and set it out to the curbside, and you should be all set with that. Next, when I know this year, and I believe it will be my next slide, but household hazardous waste and old electronics, as people are spring cleaning out their sheds as they get ready to break out their lawnmowers or other yard tools, will kind of set these things aside as something they need to get rid of. So Arlington's HHM program accepts basically all solid, liquid, or compressed gas and aerosol products that have a warning label on it, as well as kind of what the primary hazard is. So if you have something such as, I'm trying to think, maybe a fertilizer or some kind of cleaner that could be corrosive in some way, our program will take that, and it's free to use for Arlington residents. And you can schedule an appointment Monday through Thursday. I believe it's from 9 a.m. to noon by calling the number on the screen. It is also the DES Customer Contact Center. And then on Saturdays, we do have free drop-off from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with no appointment necessary. So if you'd rather just show up or a weekend is more convenient for you, we are available on Saturdays to do that. One of the other things besides HHM materials and old electronics that people may not think a lot about are batteries, specifically rechargeable batteries. Those are all made of lithium ion or some other, NiCad, I think, is another one. Those small batteries, even the batteries within greeting cards, the button batteries, AA, AAA, anything that is rechargeable, those cause or can cause fires. And so as a prevention method, we do accept those at the HHM facility, as well as at certain fire stations. They have battery drop-off points at them. When a lithium ion battery or another rechargeable battery, if the casing gets broken or wet, it has a very high likelihood of being able to spark and ignite fires. And when it's with trash or in the recycling, those materials can flame up very quickly. And if it happens at a facility, it may shut down a facility for months or years, depending on the extent of the damage. And it can also happen in the back of a collection vehicle. I believe in Fairfax, there was an incident where they had to drop the load on the street in order to be able to put out the fire. So they do cause fire hazards. And so if you do have rechargeable batteries that you need to dispose of, those are also accepted at the HHM facility, which again is in South Arlington, and you can either schedule an appointment to drop off or show up on Saturday. The other option that we offer with HHM and Old Electronics is our e-care event, which is the drive-in drop-off event that Arlington hosts twice a year. Our spring event was rescheduled, and so it will be held on Saturday, June 21st now, at 1425 North Quincy Street, which is just across from Washington Liberty High School. And the materials that we accept are any of the HHM products that I mentioned earlier, any old electronics, small scrap metal items, and Bikes for the World will also be on site collecting bicycles at this event. So as you're spring cleaning and you have things that you know you don't have a use for or would like to get rid of that fall within these categories, besides the year-round option of scheduling an appointment or showing up on a Saturday, we also do offer these twice a year. They're very popular. And we can have waits. So I recommend that if you and your neighbors know that you're going to be going to maybe load up in one vehicle or coordinate one person to do some of that collection and consolidation and just have one vehicle drop everything off. The other thing is that I'm not quite sure where I was going with that. So I lost my train of thought there for a second, but we do offer these twice a year. They are very popular. So I do recommend either using the year-round option, but I know people do love to participate in this event. So all the event details and lists of acceptable and unacceptable items can be found on the county's website for the event. And you can find it by searching e-care on the Arlington County website. So some of the other recycling services and programs that the county offers is we do have recycling drop-off centers. At Quincy Park and Trade Center, we do collect single stream recyclables. So it's going to be mixed paper, plastic bottles, and aluminum and steel cans, as well as cardboard and glass. The Aurora Hills, Lee, and Madison community centers, those are all glass only drop-off points. As part of the new solid waste management plan, we are trying to find ways and opportunities to expand glass collection, but we haven't had any luck with that yet. So we are trying to cite other drop-off locations, and we'll still continue to work through that as we move forward. One of the other things that's exciting is the food scraps drop-off. So besides the green organics cart, I know there can be some hesitation putting food waste in the green organics cart. We do offer a drop-off at the Earth Products Recycling Yard, which is in Shirlington at the County Trade Center, as well as the on-street locations that we launched last July, where we have 14 on-street bins that are available for residents to drop off. And I'll cover that program a little bit more in depth because it is one of our more recent and more in-depth programs that we've just recently launched. Additionally, we do offer monthly paper shredding in Shirlington at the Earth Products Recycling Yard. That is the first Saturday of the month from, I believe it's 8 a.m. until noon. Which is also a very popular event. So just plan accordingly. And then there are a few materials that fall outside of county programs that we still do encourage residents to recycle, and that's plastic bags and films. we rely on grocery store drop-off programs, and those are going to be at typically all of the major grocery retail chains throughout the county. And that's a program managed by Nextrex, where they take those materials and will turn them into the um, composite lumber for decking or outdoor furniture, or other products, but those do get recycled into new products that make it back out into the consumer market. And then the second one is clothing and textiles. We don't have any specific programs for these, but we do encourage residents to donate to reuse stores or drop-offs. And there's a number of them throughout the county. Could be Planet Aid, Goodwill, Salvation Army. If you do have textiles that are past their prime and may not be suitable for donation, you can throw those directly into the trash cart and they'll get disposed of that way. But if something does have some life left in it, I do recommend donating it so that way someone else is able to take care of it. The next thing that I want to talk about, and I've already mentioned this, at the beginning of the presentation, is food waste. And the slide on the screen is one that I shared a couple years ago with the Friends of Urban Agriculture, and it just kind of, it's a meme across social media that just kind of sprung up, but it really gets to the heart of the food waste problem in our country and really around the globe, right? Is that we as consumers kind of take advantage of the availability of products that we have. And so, I am very bad at this, where I will grab that bag of spring mix to make lunch salads for my lunches over the next few days. And before I know it, I am looking at it in the drawer of the fridge and it has gone bad. And so it's just one of those issues that we have been hitting hard and trying to get people to focus on reducing the amount of food waste. And so a lot of the statistics around this are kind of staggering in a way. But ReFed, which is a food waste advocacy organization, they have a great dashboard where they have different data points. But in 2003, 58% of all of the food waste generated in the state of Virginia came from residential households. I think that surprises a lot of people. They think that food waste is going to be coming more from restaurants or retails, cafeterias, things like that. But really a bulk of that food waste is coming from our households. And that is where we as individuals have the most control over what we waste and how we manage the things that we have that bring into the home. The next kind of figure here is from the EPA, I believe, that a family of four throws out about 8.7 pounds of food per week, with 6 pounds of that being edible food that was wasted. So not just scraps from, carrot peelings or things like that, but things that may still be good. And that all amounts to about $1,500 to $2,200 annually that a family of four ends up throwing out or wasting. And so we have throughout the county launched our Avoid Food Waste campaign, and there are several tips and tricks on our website, as well as on the next slide, and I'll get to some of those. But one of the things that I really want to mention is that really the best way of dealing with it is stopping food waste. We can drastically reduce the amount of food that we throw out or dispose of. But then the second best way is to manage it through composting. And earlier, we currently only capture about 20% of the food waste through the curbside program in our green organics cart. So well below some of those statistics that you saw for how we perform in recycling. Food waste and composting is one of those things that we haven't been able to really like find the right message that is going to get across to people to get them to rethink the way they dispose of it. There is and can be a lot of ick factor that goes into it, or cleanliness that people think about when it comes to food waste and separating it out into the green cart. And that's all understandable. But I would encourage you to maybe start small, with a banana peel or apple peelings, or, something that isn't going to be wet and messy, when you go to take it out to your green cart, and just build from there. A small step is still a big step when it gets added up over time. And so finding a place and meeting yourself where you're at is the best way to do that. And so really, like I said, 25% of the trash that Arlington throws out is food waste. And so it has a big part to play in getting to our 90% diversion goal. So locally and then nationally, the US has a goal of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And so all of those add up and contribute to these goals that we've set for ourselves. So I mentioned the Avoid Food Waste campaign, and this may look familiar in some degree, but we have posters out at all of the bus shelters throughout the county that list these tips on how to avoid food waste. And so really, I would encourage you to maybe pick one or two of these that seem doable, and start there. There's no reason that you have to reduce your food waste by 100% overnight. But starting small and picking one or two things that you think are attainable for you is a great way to start down that path. And so I would just encourage you to think about it, and start taking action in some way that you can. So this led to our launch of the on-street food scraps drop-off pilot that started in July of last year. The county deployed 14 containers throughout the county, the locations you can see here on the screen. And this is largely oriented towards multifamily residents within the county, because the single family residents have their green organics cart. Multifamily residents don't really have a disposal option for food waste. And so of the multifamily units in the county, there's just over 89,000 units within the county. With the initial deployment of these 14 containers, we're able to at least make this available to about 20%, just over 20% of those have one of these bins within a 2.5-minute walk from their building. And so there is no, it's free to use. There's no registration required. If you would like to participate, you do have to download the Big Belly Smart Compost app. There is no registration or personal information that you need to provide in order to use the application. It will ask you to share your location, because the way that the bins work is that there is an unlock button that when you are within about 10 feet of the bin, it recognizes the Bluetooth connection and will allow it to unlock. And the reason for this is food waste can be one of the largest contaminated waste streams if it's just open and available for people to use without intentionality. And so by keeping the bins locked, it prevents people from walking by, seeing a bin and thinking, this is the place where I need to put my trash, or this is a place to throw away a plastic bottle. And so it makes it very intentional that someone that's showing up is accessing the bin to get rid of their food waste. And so that's the reason for that. We have had a couple people kind of share with us where they've seen people trying to open the hatch on the front of it because they had trash in their hand. And then because they couldn't open it, they moved to the black trash cart that's probably just a few steps away to dispose of it. And so it just proves that it does work. I know that downloading a smart app or an app on your phone is not for everyone. And so we do have the drop off at the trade center and at different farmers markets or other locations throughout the county do accept food waste. So if this is not an option for you, I would encourage you to look into some of those others. The acceptable and non-acceptable items are almost identical to what the curbside organics list looks like. Pardon me. With the main exception being that while residents are able to throw pizza boxes into their green cart for composting, we don't accept them in the curbs or in the on-street program because they are just too big to fit in the bins. And so that is really the only exception. But anything that grows goes when it comes to composting in the county. So meats, bones, dairy, anything that you or would not want to put in, say, a backyard composting bin can go in your green organics cart. And it gets taken to an industrial composting facility in Prince William County where they're able to actually break down and compost all of those materials that may survive a little bit longer in your backyard compost or even create possible pathogens and issues down the road. So the curbside program as well as the on-street program are identical in what they accept, except for the pizza boxes. So far, I mentioned we just launched this program in July of last year. We have seen tremendous success as you know, this goes for one of our new programs. We average just under 12,000 pounds of food scraps dropped off at these bins every month. It does fluctuate a little bit. You'll see that January and February dipped a little bit as we had, we'll say, an unusually cold winter that time of year. So people weren't going out and walking their food scraps down to the bin, but there is a lot of participation. Overall, since we launched, we have collected just over 89,000 pounds of food waste that we're able to divert away from landfilling or incineration. And we have, I believe, I got the camera covering that part of the slide, but just over 2,100 unique users. So we see a lot of participation within the county for a new program. And so we are looking to purchase 10 new containers to deploy later this summer or early fall. And a lot of that placement will be focused on the high density corridors within the county because that is where a large majority of multifamily buildings and residents are. And so we will be expanding this as we can since we've seen tremendous growth with it. And we were recognized just last month with the Governor's Excellence Award, Environmental Excellence Award. We got a bronze annotation for this program. So it is something that we're very proud of to be able to offer to the community and grow as we can. So the last thing I'll kind of leave with on this topic is that the on-street food waste collection and even the curbside is a great way to manage food waste. but really true success is going to be measured in the elimination of wasted food. And that really goes towards everything that we think about as trash. Being able to reduce what we throw away and increase what we're able to recycle or just get throwing out in general is going to be the best way of reaching towards our goal. So encouraging to buy reused or secondhand, things that you may not need to buy for a single use, or even renting or borrowing tools from the library's programs are also great ways of just kind of reducing what we buy and throw away. And so with that, I kind of, in wrapping up, is we just finished Earth Month in April. And what I've asked as I have given these presentations to the community is that I challenge you to take action in some way that you can. And as I mentioned before, you and the individual household are in the best state and best position to make the decision of what that action can be. But there are a few examples here on the screen. So I mentioned buying secondhand goods, donating items that still have a useful life. If you are using one of our programs that you have found beneficial or have had success with, I encourage you to be an advocate and share those with your friends and neighbors. The best way to get people to change their behavior is to realize that it's not different than what everyone else is already doing. So by letting people know that you participate in a program and that you've had success and sharing your tips and tricks with how to do that, that is really going to be the best way to get people and other residents, friends, neighbors to kind of try it and see what works for them. The other thing is that Arlington County, in partnership with Eco Action Arlington, did launch the Get Green Arlington app, which has a kind of a series of actions that you can take related to sustainability, recycling, food waste, energy efficiency, a whole host of things. And again, it is free to use. There is some registration with it. We are not directly involved with this app, but I did want to just kind of give it a shout out, as it is one of the resources available to residents, within the county. And with that, I don't know, Gary, if there are any questions that came in, but we can open it
Yes,
up for questions.
we've got a lot of questions and comments, so we should
Okay.
probably speed through these as best we can since it's 10 minutes to 11. First one is somebody said they recently learned that pill bottles are not acceptable for recycling. First off, is that true? And secondly, are there other common misconceptions about things that we think are recyclable but are not?
So I would say, like, within Arlington system, again, as long as it meets the plastic resin numbers that I mentioned before, like a 1 through 7, except for 6, they can go in the curbside cart. I believe most pill bottles are either going to be a number 2 or a number 5. But if you feel more comfortable not throwing them in the recycling, trash is also an acceptable disposal option for those. The other option that I would present is one that even I didn't think of a lot, but some veterinary offices will take old pill bottles that have had the labels removed in order to disperse other like medications for pets or things like that. So if that is something you want to look in, I would just call the vet and just confirm if that's something that they would accept, but that is an alternative solution for that.
The Animal Welfare Rescue League accepts them.
Great, thanks for that, Carolyn. I will keep that now in my back pocket because I didn't know that.
Okay, next question. This person's been wrapping their food waste in newspaper before putting it in their recycling cart. Is that okay?
Yes, so any food waste that's going to go in the organics cart, it can go in loose. So if you just have a bucket that you put it in, you can dump it in loose. It can be bagged in a green compostable bag as long as it's certified compostable. You can use a brown paper bag or newspaper to wrap it. So any of those options are sufficient for throwing your food waste in your green cart.
Where does the recycled material from their apartment building go? They said it's picked up by the waste management company.
So I guess I can talk kind of, we'll say generically about this, depending on the company and where they have their contracts. There are a limited number of recycling facilities in the region. We don't have any in Arlington. So there's a facility in Manassas or in Sterling, and there may be a couple others. But typically, any recycling that's picked up is going to go to one of those. It's called a material recovery facility, where those materials are sorted and separated into their certain categories. But that's most likely where recycling from an apartment building is being taken, as to one of those facilities.
You talked about looking at additional ways to handle glass recycling. Are you considering people being able to get a curbside recycling bin for glass?
So the way I will say that is not one of the options we've considered. I won't say that it's not off the table, but there are a lot of potential issues with that. So the main options that we've been looking at are additional drop-off locations. I do know that there are some very entrepreneurial, I believe it was a high school student started the company that does curbside glass pickup. And I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But there are people that will, for a small fee, pick it up curbside. But that's not something that the county will probably be involved with anytime soon, just because of some of the hurdles that we have with the scale that we would have to do it at.
Okay, do you know what happens to items that go into the regular trash for incineration but don't really burn? Does it all just go into the incinerator and you sort through the leftovers, or is it sorted first?
So it is sorted after the fact. Anything that is taken to the waste to energy facility is going to be fed into the incineration process. On the back end of that, there is they do remove any of the ferrous metals that may have been in the material and that didn't burn. So that metal does get pulled out and recycled, but anything else that is mixed in with the ash that may not have burned will be taken to an ash monofill, which is a special monofill for incineration ash that is just has certain requirements and regulations that need to be met in order to make sure that it's disposed safely, because that ash does have heavy metals and things in it. So it is regulated, but the only thing that's removed after the fact is the metal, but everything else that may have been in the incineration process will get disposed of at the landfill.
Okay, are yogurt containers considered single-use plastics?
So I will say that, and I will caveat my answer a little bit, that it's going to depend on the brand. So different brands use different plastic resins to make their containers. Some will be a plastic number 5, some will be a plastic number 6. I believe it's Dannon. It's the little green containers that are usually a number 6, and those would not be acceptable for recycling in the curbside program. But if it is I believe they're the containers like Chobani or something like that are usually a number 5. Those would be acceptable as long as they're cleaned and rinsed.
Okay. And you did say recycle any and all beverage containers, right? So that would include things like milk cartons and orange juice cartons.
Exactly. Yep. So I think one of the things that I had mentioned when we talk about milk and juice cartons, it's the kind of like the paperboard cartons, not the plastic milk jugs that you think about, but like um, the ones with the angular top that may
Yeah.
have a plastic spout on them. Those are the aseptic containers, and those can be anything from milk, juice, soups, broths, different things like that. Those are all recyclable in Arlington's recycling center.
Mm.
Okay. Next question is, what about uh, soda plastic from things like McDonald's? You said no straws, but what about cups and lids and all the other little bits of plastic you get?
So the cold beverage cups, so from McDonald's or any other fast food or even from coffee, those are typically going to be recyclable. The lids are hit or miss, depending. So if you don't see the recycling symbol on a lid, you can just dispose of that and the straw at the same time and throw the cup into the recycling. The other thing is coffee cups, so hot coffee. That is one that people ask me a lot about, hot coffee cups. If the container or cup does not say that it is compostable, I would recommend throwing it into the trash. Most times those cups are lined with a very fine layer of plastic in order to help prevent the liquid from leaking out or softening the cup if it sits in there too long. So any of the hot coffee cups and their lids, I would recommend throwing into the trash.
Okay. Here's somebody who's gets a lot of fundraising appeals from charities and political candidates and things like that. It's can you do you know of any way to get people to stop sending so much of that junk mail? It's not like catalogs where you can sign up and tell them not to send them.
I was going to say, I believe the only option that I'm aware of is the I think it's catalog choice. I believe there's information on the county's website about how to sign up to elect not to be on mailing lists, but I don't know that that extends to, we'll say that like political or other types of organizations besides catalogs. But I believe they do reach a little bit further than just catalogs, but I don't know of any one good spot to sign up to not receive any of that material.
Okay, and it sounds like you said that cardboard packaging that had food in it can be recycled.
So cardboard packaging that is food soiled, it would go in the green organics bin and can be composted. If your cardboard box has food soiling, don't put it into the blue recycling cart, but it can go into the green organics cart.
Okay. What about the lids of glass jars, most of which are some kind of metal?
So the metal lids can either be thrown into your curbside recycling cart. I know people do ask, there's some guidance about being less than 4 inches in diameter, which can cause some confusion. And that's simply because those things smaller than that have a higher likelihood of falling through the sorting equipment and just being sorted out as residual waste through the recycling process. With glass recycling, so you have 2 options with the glass jar lids. If it's metal, it can either go into your blue curbside cart separate from the glass jar, or you can leave the lid on the glass jar and drop it off at one of the glass recycling drop-off points, would be the two options for metal lids.
Okay. How do you recycle Brita water filters?
So those I do not believe can be recycled. Um, if there is a way for it to be recycled, it's probably a niche type of collection and recycling. Um, I believe some of the companies that do that, I believe it's TerraCycle, would be like a third party that may do that, which is like a collect and mail in a box. But a lot of the plastics that they end up collecting are usually downcycled into some sort of single-use plastic when it's recycled. So um, yeah, so either TerraCycle or another third party that may accept them, or your black trash cart, but they would not be accepted in the curbside program.
Okay. So empty plastic containers of things like cleaning products, would those go to household hazardous materials, or could you just throw them into your
So
recycling?
if they're empty and they're plastic, they could be rinsed quickly and then thrown in your curbside cart. If there's still material in them and it's listed, it meets one of those hazardous material labelings that I mentioned earlier. It can be taken to the household hazardous materials facility. But if not, I guess it would depend on the specific material. And that's kind of the trouble with going out and doing these presentations. I know people have very specific questions, but without seeing the product directly, it's hard for me to give a definitive answer. So yeah, I would say if it's empty and is rinsed and clean, it can go in the recycling cart. If it's still has a little bit of product left in it, take it to the HHM facility and we'll be able to correctly dispose of it in whatever manner that is.
Okay. We've got somebody here who lives in Fairfax but works in Arlington. Can she bring her recycling and hazardous materials into Arlington for disposal?
So the recycling could be, we don't check or monitor the drop-off locations. So if it's single stream recycling, she could take it to one of the drop-off locations. The HHM program is solely for Arlington residents because there is fees associated with that program that's charged through the household solid waste rate or the utility bill that residents pay. So that's why it's limited to county residents. I believe it's Fairfax City, though, does fall under some of the, so if it's Fairfax County, then no. But if it's Fairfax City, then I would say yes, that we cover some of those programs for them.
Okay, you talked about what to do with rechargeable batteries. What about non-rechargeable batteries?
So non-rechargeable batteries can just go in the black trash cart. If you have any confusion with them, I would just recommend taking them to the household hazardous materials facility or one of the drop-off fire station drop-offs, because the batteries are identical in size and shape to their alkaline versus rechargeable. Like they look identical. So if you're not sure, I would gear towards the safety aspect of it and take it to a drop off. But if it says alkaline on the packaging or the outer shell of the battery, then it can go in the trash. But if it's rechargeable or says lithium or NiCad on it, I would highly recommend that it goes to the drop off location.
Okay. Do grocery stores accept other plastic bag type products like the film wrapped around a flat of water bottles or paper towels, things like that?
Yes, they do. So the plastic bag and films programs at grocery stores aren't just limited to like plastic shopping bags. There's a whole kind of list of different plastic materials that they will accept. And so like the plastic wrapping around a case of water is acceptable. Ziploc bags that are clean and dry are acceptable. Newspaper bags, dry cleaning bags, the Amazon packaging that says store drop off only on it, which is the bubble wrap that doesn't have paper on the outside. Those are acceptable at grocery store drop offs. Typically at the drop off location, they will have a list of acceptable items. But you can also go to, if you go online and search for Nextrex, which is Nextrex, they have a list of acceptable and non-acceptable items on their website as well, that you can reference.
You talked about donating used clothing and things like that. But this is a question about stuff that's so far gone that you can't really donate it.
Yep.
Some jurisdictions are looking at ways to keep that out of the trash stream. Is Arlington investigating things like that?
So one of the initiatives outlined in the solid waste management plan is looking at the possibility of developing a center for hard to recycle materials, which would be kind of like a convenience drop-off center, but it would, the exact list of items has still to be discussed, but it would possibly include things like styrofoam, mattresses, plastic bags and films, a whole slew of things. But I would say that while it's best to keep it out of the waste stream, if it has no usable life left, and disposal is the only option, then that is what we have to do, at least until the systems and programs are in place to help manage those things.
Do you have any information on how much material is composted in people's backyards?
We, I would say we do not. That is one of the things that is not one of the strong data points that we have, is just how much people compost in their backyard. I do know when we do encourage like grass cycling, which is like not collecting your grass clippings, but leaving them on your lawn to decompose. We do account for those types of things that we don't have great data for, through a few bonus points that the state provides on our annual recycling report. But we don't have any clear picture of just how many people or how much material is actually composted in backyards.
Okay, what should people do with small wooden items like a wooden spoon that's cracked and can't be used anymore?
So those would just go in the trash. We don't have any way of recycling them, or even composting. I would say if you have anything that is besides yard waste that is of wood, it's very hard to tell how it's been treated or produced, because there is pressure treated lumber. There are different things that get added to products like that that would not make them suitable for composting. So if you have something like that that you're unsure about, I would just recommend throwing it in the trash.
Okay. A lot of things like cooking oil, fat, and grease can be liquid at room temperature. What's the best way to dispose of those?
So I would recommend not putting them down your garbage disposal, for one, because that can cause other issues for you than just the disposal. But if you have, you know, like maybe like an old large yogurt container or sour cream container that has some sort of lid on it that you're able to dump that oil and grease into. If it solidifies at room temperature, put it in something that maybe not as tight fitting as a lid. and throwing it in your trash. But if it is going to remain liquid at room temperature, I would recommend putting it in some sort of like plastic container that has a tight fitting lid, such as an old like water bottle or soda bottle, something like that, that you can put the lid on and throw it in your trash, and it's not going to risk breaking open either in your trash cart or in the truck as it gets transported. So
Where can we find the exact locations of the curbside recycling bins?
So there is a list on the county website. If you go to the website and search composting, it should come up with a list of the 14 locations. If you have downloaded the app, the locations are pinpointed in the app or on the map within the application that show the location of all of those. And so you're able to see like on the app whether or not a container is full or on the verge of being full. So it can save you a trip if you check beforehand. But the locations are available on the website or within the app itself.
Okay, and you talked about recycling plastic bags. You said take them to your grocery store. Um, I've heard stories that they don't really get recycled, that they just end up going into the trash anyway.
So I I am sure with every story there's a grain of truth to it. And it's hard to say with 100% certainty that it happened. Most of the grocery store programs that I'm aware of, and even through the Next Trex program that I mentioned, stores are getting rebates for the materials that are being picked up and collected through programs like that. So they're getting some, money back based on the weights that they're collecting in those materials. So unless there was something that prevented them from, having a collection or having something picked up, I find it difficult to think that they would just throw it out if they're advertising that they're recycling through one of these programs. But there could be something that came up at one point where they just had so much and the company wasn't able to pick it up and they needed the space for storage. And so they just made the decision that at this moment, the best way to get rid of it is going to be in the trash. And that's what they decided to do. So I wouldn't say that it doesn't happen, but I don't think it's evasive throughout the entire system for recycling plastic bags. It may have just been a one-off case-by-case basis for that.
Does the county have any kind of program in place to help homeowners set up their own compost bins?
We do not have a specific program for that. On our website, we do have materials posted and resources available from the Virginia Cooperative Extension that has some do's and don'ts and how to start and set up a program as well as managing it. So I would look towards those if they're looking to get I'll call it more of like a retaining container for their compost. They're not large, but if they're wanting to get started, we do have some of those for sale at our office at the Trade Center that residents can stop by and purchase if they're interested in that. But that's not necessary to start backyard composting. So any of the resources through a cooperative extension office would be the best way to get started with a program like that for yourself.
Okay, if somebody needs a new larger black or blue bin, what's the process to get one?
So there's two ways that they can do that. They can either call the DS contact center, which is 703-228-5000, and one of the representatives will be able to submit a ticket for them requesting that cart change, whether it's an upgrade to a larger cart or downgrading to a smaller cart. Or they can go online and I forget what the exact wording is, but you're able to submit a help ticket through the trash and recycling site and submit that request yourself. If you're unsure or not wanting to navigate the website in order to do that, I would just recommend calling the contact center, and they'll take all of your information and submit the ticket on your behalf. So those would be the two ways of doing that. I will take a moment to mention that curbside service, if you do have old electronics or scrap metal items, I had mentioned e-care and the HHM facility, but we do offer curbside collection for those materials if you're served by the county services. Those do require a ticket to be submitted just to schedule the pickup and make the contractor aware that they need to stop by and pick it up. But that is an additional option for scrap metal or old electronics if you live in single family and have the curbside services from the county.
Okay, and just to reiterate, if you've got old paint cans, especially if they still have some paint in them, those are hazardous materials, right?
So they, I would say yes. They're not necessarily hazardous in the way of something being a fire hazard or toxic or those means, but they can cause issues. And by dropping them off at the HHM program and facility, they are able to be, the paint is able to be recycled into new paint. There's companies that recycle old paint into new paint products. So it does get recycled if you drop it off. But if there's a little bit in the can and you don't want to make a trip all the way down, you can leave the can opened and let the paint dry out. And then once it's dried out, you can throw it in your trash for collection that way.
What's the best way to dispose of broken small appliances like blenders and things like that?
So small appliances, those can be collected as old electronics through either the curbside program, the HHM program, or during e-care. If it's a blender or there are pieces that are just plastic that don't have any type of electronics pieces in them, you can dispose of them with your trash. But if you would like to recycle the pieces that have those more mechanical or electric components, they can be taken to one of the drop-offs for recycling.
Okay. Um, what should we do with frozen food containers? That's a pretty
So
open-ended question, I know.
it is. I will say frozen food typically comes in, I'll say, different layers of packaging. So if it's a tray of frozen food that has a fiber board or paper board outer packaging, that outer packaging or that box that it came in can be recycled through the curbside service or one of the recycling drop-offs. The tray or the film that is over top of it, I would recommend throwing those in the trash when they're done, because they would be similar to like a coffee cup where it is going to be lined with plastic and therefore not recyclable.
Okay. How important is it to remove labels from things that you're throwing away?
So if it's going into your recycling cart, I would say removing the label isn't completely necessary. Same with glass bottles, labels can stay on those. The plastic bags and films drop off, they usually ask for any labels to be cut off, like paper labels, mailing labels, things like that, to be cut off before they're deposited in one of those drop-offs. But there is Yeah, I would say across the recycling industry, there is a what I'll call acceptable contamination. And those are going to be the things like labels on steel cans or labels on plastic bottles, things like that. Even mixed material packaging, such as like a spaghetti box, which has the plastic window in it. You don't have to remove the plastic window before throwing it into your recycling cart. If you want to take that extra step, that's great. It makes the stream cleaner, but is not necessary in order to recycle it.
Okay. And questions about finding out the exact locations of the curbside recycling bins. For instance, the app just says there's one at Virginia Square, but doesn't give a precise locations.
So they don't have a physical address associated with them because they are placed in the public right of way. The Virginia Square container is, I believe it's like right outside of the metro entrance on the curb. So they, yeah, like I mentioned, they don't have a physical address because they're not for a specific property, but rather on the right of way. And so the closest we give, I think, on the website is an intersection. So like Clarendon and North Pierce Street. It's going to be at that intersection, and I believe it's on the northwest corner of the intersection. But because they're more, kind of out in the open, we don't have specific addresses for them, unfortunately. So if you're gonna go to one, I would go to the general facility, and they're bright like lime green containers, so they should be very hard to miss if you do go to one of them and try to find it.
I've got a suggestion here that it would be great to put AI to use and have a chat bot where you could upload a picture of something and it would say, okay, it goes in this bin or that bin or whatever.
I know we do have the where does it go tool on our website, but I believe that it's just kind of like your standard search bar where you enter the term. Um, I'll have to see what options we have for that because that's actually a really great idea that I've not heard before. So I'll take that back and let the team know if there's some way that, those things are like different contracts for terms, but as we come up upon a renewal or something, we'll have to see and explore what other options there are other than just the search box, because I know not everyone knows what or how something would be called in the system. We try to capture a lot of terms in order to point them in the right direction, but know that they're not going to capture everything. But the AI image search sounds like a great way of allowing people to do that. So thank you for that, whoever suggested that.
Yep. And somebody posted a link to the Where Does It Go app. And that was immediately followed by the question, how often does that get updated?
So we monitor it frequently. I will say the system, the way we manage materials changes, but it doesn't change like every week. But as things change, we do actively go in and try to update it. It has been around for a while, but we do have someone on our team that does actively manage that. But if you, as a resident, are using it and you see something that doesn't seem right to you, you can email the Solid Waste Bureau at arlrecycles@arlingtonva.us and just suggest or highlight what you think may not be right, and we can certainly check it out and confirm what needs to be there.
Okay, we've got a couple of comments here of people saying that you talked about the ick factor with recycling food, that they store their uh, plastic bag with the food in it in the freezer, and that way you don't have to worry about it going bad and attracting fruit flies and who knows what all else.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I know a lot of residents do. I do know that some people don't want to do that because of space constraints, but it is one that works really well, is freezing your food scraps until the day of collection or the night before, and then taking it out of the freezer and dropping it into your green bin or even at one of the drop-offs. Is a great way of managing some of that ick factor and the bugs that can come from it. So, and that's where I mentioned earlier, being an advocate and sharing your success stories. Like, as those of you who do that, like, that's a great thing to share with people, that it's one of your tips and tricks for how you manage it. But yeah, that's exactly the type of thing that I hope people will talk about and recommend to friends and family and neighbors if they give it a shot.
And somebody had talked about disposing of uh, liquid, cooking oils and things like that. I know that there's a product you can buy that you can mix in with cooking oil that solidifies it, and you can then just throw it right in the trash. But I think unless you're a restaurant or you do a lot of deep frying, you probably don't generate that much oil to justify that.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the specific products. One of the other things that might be a way of doing it is, and I'm just thinking of this as you raise that point, is kitty litter would be one of those options that may suck up some of that grease and oil that would put it more in like a semi-solid state, and would be able to prevent some of the mess that may come from it if it's just solid liquid in a bottle or something like that. But that's just me throwing that off at the top of my head, but I'm sure there are products specifically out there for grease and stuff within the home, even maybe even smaller quantities than commercial uses. So
Yeah. Last question, I believe. Is it okay to put 2 or 3 food waste bags in your green cart at the same time?
yeah, I will say you could fill up your green cart with food waste and that would be perfectly fine by us. It will still get collected and composted. I do know with the ick factor, people prefer to mix it in or throw a bag in with, some other yard waste, because it just kind of like help, I guess, let some airflow around it, prevent it from like getting like icky within the cart. But if your cart just had food waste in it, whether it was bagged or loose, we would still collect it. So, yep.
Okay. Well, if I've missed anybody's question, please raise your hand or resubmit it. But otherwise, I think we've addressed pretty much everything,
I
and
think
we've
that,
kept you 30 minutes late. So,
right. I think this is probably one of the longest coffee and conversations I have been privileged to host. So congratulations, Doug. You get the prize for
Thank you.
being,
I will say, I know from having conversations and going out to present to residents that there are a lot of questions that can be confusing sometimes. So, I'm happy to talk about this. I know people, when they can have their question answered, love to ask it. So I'm glad that we were able to get through all of the questions. But if something else comes up and you find me out at a different community presentation, feel free to follow up with me. So, yeah.
sounds good. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Doug Krietemeyer, right?
Yes.
Okay, and we obviously have, since this is recorded, we can get your email address and follow up if necessary, or look on the website.
Absolutely.
So in next week, if you want to learn about securing your phone and computer, you need to tune in again. Dr. Diane Murphy, who's the director and senior faculty member at the Center for the Innovative Workforce at Marymount University, will be joining us and telling you how to keep your phone and your computer safe. So always great presentations on Coffee and Conversation. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day, go have some lunch. And again, thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you.